make sure that doesn't happen the whole time I'm talking. So I'm Vic Shannon, I'm the superintendent for York County Schools. I appreciate you all being here tonight. Before I jump into my comments, I do want to acknowledge we have a few elected officials in the room, and I want to acknowledge them being here. If you want to silence your phones and radios, Mr. Bullock, we can do that this time. But I appreciate Tom Shepard, Board of Supervisor here. Tom, we appreciate you being here. Thank you. Laura Geralt, School Board Member, thank you for your support in being here. And Mr. Schaefer, as well as School Board Member, for being here. Thank you, guys. So thank you for coming out tonight. I know, first of all, that none of us want to be going through this right now. But I thought it was necessary to have another forum to address additional questions and concerns that you might have. Before we jump into this, I want to thank our staff, especially our two principals, Ms. Tiana Anthony and Ms. Whitney Cataldo. If we can just please give them a quick round of applause. These ladies have done a fantastic job under really extraordinary circumstances, and they have worked day and night with our team. They've worked day and night with Dr. Butler over at York High School and Ms. Young over at Tabb Middle School, making sure that we're trying to provide the best that we can for our kids. We also have assistant principals. They've done a great job, our counselors, and all of our staff at the impacted schools. But I want to especially publicly thank our teachers for their adaptability and their care for our students. I spent some time today with them at Grafton Middle, or Tabb Middle, and at Grafton High School, or York High School. And I spent some time with staff members. At Grafton Middle, I got to meet with 12 or 13 teachers, walked in on a meeting that they were having, and I was thrilled with their discussion. I walked in and they all looked at me, and not such a good look, if you will. However, I will share, the conversation they were having was about how are we going to continue to help our kids? What are some remediation strategies we can use? How can I reach them on the alternate days when we're not in school? They're absolutely having the right conversations. I'm really proud of them. And at Grafton High School, Ms. Cataldo and I walked that building today, and we went into the teacher's lounge, which is where everything happens, right, in the school. And the teachers were super positive, just really thankful of the staff at York High School and how they welcomed them, how they've shared materials with them. And quite honestly, I was taken back by that they were that positive, and I'm really excited about that. I really appreciate their focus on kids. At the last forum, I shared that our community is strong and supportive, and it is, and I firmly believe that. I want to thank the people. There are many people in our community that reached out to us, and they're helping us. I also want to say to anyone in the audience tonight or on Facebook Live, if I haven't responded to your email today or yesterday, I want to get to it. I promise we're going to get to that. We have other staff members as well who I want to convey that message. We pride ourselves in being responsive to parents and constituents, so we'll make sure that we get to those. So with that said, let me jump into our agenda for today, or for this evening. So our agenda for tonight, we're going to take you through, I'm going to take you through a timeline of events. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. All right. How about you way up in the back? Can you hear me okay? Thank you. All right. So I'm going to take you through timeline of events. I'm going to have Dr. Carroll, our Chief Operations Officer, come forward and talk to you about a status report and a decision review. And then Ms. Skinner, our Chief Academic Officer, is going to come up and talk through meeting mandates as well as supporting our students. And then we'll move to our question and answer portion. When you came in, you had an opportunity to fill some stickies out. We had a number of different categories up there, and our team is back there grouping those right now when we move into that process. All right, so by show of hands, who attended our last forum, just so we can get a sense? Okay, so that's a little bit more than half of you. Okay, wonderful. We are going to share some information that you may have already heard, so please bear with us as we go through that, but it's important as we lay the foundation for the decision points as we move forward. So our protocol, we want folks to obviously actively listen, assume goodwill. We know this is an emotional time for a lot of folks and a lot of families and their kids. We want to make sure that we're respectful during this forum, and then we're going to honor our question, that you honor our question and answer process. All right, so I'm going to jump into our overview of the timeline. So essentially on February 3rd, as you know, we had the fire. We lost 300,000 square feet that housed 2 schools and over 2,100 students. And it's important that you hear the size of that complex, 300,000 square foot building. That evening we contacted our insurance that evening, and then quite honestly that night we began planning daily, nightly, and over the weekend. On February 4th, we made our initial contact with VDOE. I had many conversations with Dr. Lane, and we've had many, many conversations since that time. Also on February 4th, the insurance adjuster and the restoration contractor were at the site by noon the next day. On February 6th, our team had a meeting with the insurance company, Dominion Energy, contractors, electricians, architects, engineers, manufacturers, and many county officials. The information from that meeting informed our conservative timeline for re-entry on May 26th. On February... Hello? David? Sorry, guys. I apologize. I'm certainly loud enough that you can probably still hear me, right? Just in case this happens again. Thank you. All right. Apologize, guys. All right. So, on February 7th, we released our initial plan. So, essentially 4 days after the fire, we released our plan, and we made sure that we put in our notes that adjustments were likely to be made. At that time, our number one goal was get kids back in school as soon as possible. That was our first goal. And we weren't going to make choices in the first, or make any changes the first 2 weeks. On the 8th, we had our forums on that Saturday, so many of you who attended that. We continued working with staff as well on remaining logistics for getting students back in school. On February 11th, our students started school back at Tabb Middle School and at York High School. So additionally on the 11th, we received new information and guidance from the Virginia Department of Education related to blended learning and its role in supporting our plan. Ms. Skinner will touch on that later in this presentation. They also encouraged the division to add more days and time to the calendar, which we agree with. On February 12th, we began running scenarios. And when I mean running scenarios, I mean running everything that we can come up with as far as running a scheduling option. We have a team of people that do that for the school division by period to make sure that we're meeting all of the requirements. So we ran all those scenarios related to our new reality, compared them each to our initial criteria. And those of you who were here last time, you remember that criteria, and Dr. Carroll will go over that in a minute. This involves staff from instruction, operations, informational technology, transportation, and our schools, many of whom have students impacted by the decisions. On February 17th, we discovered the emergency panel damage, which if any of you saw the video, we showed what that was. And while we have confidence in our timeline of reopening the complex in late May, if a worst case scenario plan is not in place now, we would be faced with even worse options, such as extending the school year. And I want folks to pay attention to this. One of our last conversations that we had with the Department of Education, I specifically asked our state superintendent, when we asked the state superintendent, what is a reasonable time to end the school year? His answer was mid-July. So then on February 20th, it started snowing. I'm glad a few of you can smile at that snow. So we also face the possibility of closing school on Friday and Saturday. So if Grafton had not been able to attend school that first Saturday, it would have also impacted our adjusted schedules. So that brings us to February 25th, this week, which is when we shared our new plan with our community. So I'm going to talk to you about some contributing factors. So as you know, the state provided further guidance in regards to our initial plan. And while they have been extremely supportive throughout this process, the state encouraged the division to implement additional makeup time through extended school hours, Saturday classes, removal of scheduled holidays, and/or the extension of the school year in order to ensure all schools meet the 990 instructional hours, again, which is something I agree with. They shared that YCSD would be the first school division to not exhaust every option to meet the 990 requirement. Our number one guiding principle is to do what's best for students under the circumstances that we're facing. As parents, you're each advocating for the needs and the interest of your children. As a parent of 3 in this school division, 2 of whom are impacted by the plans that we put in place, I get that. We listen to your advocacy, your questions, concerns through our forums, Ask YCSD, the YCSD Facebook page, and the many individual emails that we received. We've been working through a variety of issues to develop a plan for all students in the event that the Grafton complex cannot be opened before June 11th. And again, that's worst case scenario. We've tried to be as transparent as possible throughout all of this and forthcoming throughout this ongoing solution. While you may not like the decisions we've made, we've laid out all the facts to our community. So we're going to review some of those facts right now. I'm going to ask Dr. Carroll if he'll please come up to the podium, and he's going to take over the next section, which is a status report.
Forgive me here, this a little bit of fun during this time. Okay, and I just first want to say that I want to underscore everything that Dr. Shandor said about this not being what we wanted. There is no perfect solution other than having a spare building, 300,000 square feet sitting around. And I don't say that flippantly, but that's what it would take to have a perfect solution. So our efforts were surrounding picking the best solution we could, meeting the most needs we could. So first, when we talk about the status report of the building, we have first the investigation. The Fire and Life Safety of York County has completed their investigation. They found fault with the switch and that didn't operate correctly. But we were not able to get into that room until after the 17th, as the insurance was protecting that for an independent investigation. So that component is now at an independent lab, independent of the insurance company or any of the vendors, and so they will be taking months to work through that. And so that is ongoing now. So next we'll talk about the electrical damage so that you understand that. Oh, I'm sorry. So here are a couple of pictures of before and after. So the picture on the left shows you the component that went bad. The yellow coloring there is from the heat that was exhibited from the electrical fire. On the right is a current picture of that room as we're able to get to it now. And you see on the floor a lot of cabling that comes up from the floor into the electrical components. And we just got approval recently, and we've signed contracts now for that cabling to be pulled. That's the cabling that goes out to the outer power panels out in the building. Those power panels, we have inspected those, and those were not damaged by the smoke damage. So we'll be working on pulling those cables and replacing them before the arrival of the new components. So And in that room was where all of the fire and water was contained. It's not a very big room, but all of what happened stayed there except for the smoke. And so smoke is the next issue, and the one that's the most pervasive in the building. And there's two pictures, and the one on the left is one from the day after the event. And if you look on the floor, you can see where the soot came to the floor, but the soot is sticking to the walls and the ceilings everywhere in the building. And so we've got that restoration company working and cleaning everything in that building. I mean, quite frankly, it's going to be cleaner than the day it was given to the county 22 years ago. I mean, they're under the lockers, they are into the roof, and what you see on the right there is all the ceiling grid. All of those tiles are down, and the workers are up there cleaning the ceiling, cleaning the walls, cleaning the floors completely. And air scrubbers have been running in there since the day after the event. And so it's that level of cleaning, and it's really an impressive operation when you go in there and you watch them. We have over 75 workers in that building working 6 days a week for 10 hours a day. And they are diligent, and they know what they are doing. This is not just a cobble some temporary workers, give them a sponge and go. These people do this for a living. They have worked for Belfour for years. Some of them are a couple of large families that they just do this, and they follow them all over the Atlantic seaboard. And so they're trained and skilled and know what they're doing. Next is more of the restoration work, and here's an example on the left of them cleaning the ceiling of the common areas up on the scissor lift, so you can see they're quite far up there. Everything is being cleaned. And then on the right, there's an example from the high school band room. And so it just depends on where your stuff was and what the level of cleaning is that's happening. For that particular band instrument, it was behind 2 doors and in a band, and in an instrument case, so that's just getting wiped down. In the middle school room, there were some instruments that were laid out, and so they weren't protected by much, and those instruments have to be cleaned inside and out. So that's the level of care that's happening there. And finally, that brings us to the expenses. There's been some concern that we're being limited by funds, but I want to assure the community that this is a fully insurable event, and we've been in contact with our insurance company since the night of the incident. Also, York County has been there to help us with some funds, to give us some cash flow so that we can be able to handle everything that comes our way. The bottom line is there's been no event, no solution, or anything that we've done so far that's been limited by money. So that's a nice place to be speaking from, so that we can have the best timeline we can to deal with this safely and effectively. So the question now is, how did we get to the solution that we got to, or we arrived at? So if you have watched a school board meeting in the last 4 years, you'll hear us often refer to Trigo Ed. It's a collection of protocols that we use when we make decisions. And we use them for all the big decisions, and we'll use them for a lot of the smaller decisions too. And there's no magic to it, but it guides us through questions that we want to consider. And depending on the type of question or problem that you're trying to solve, then it gives you the questions to ask. And we've worked through that. And in this situation, it was called a decision analysis. And so we use this to arrive at our initial solution. And so just to break it down, make it simple, we arrived at 15 criteria. The first thing we did was establish what are the 15 criteria that we think are important to make the best decision we can make. And then we came up with 9 initial solutions and measured those against the 15 criteria. And after that, then you consider the risks of the ones that, they each kind of come up to a mathematical number, but you don't do it just on the numbers. Then you look at each of the top options and you consider the risks of those. What are things that can detract that you may have something that's the top choice on the board, but there is some factor that makes it untenable. You can't use that solution. So you consider all the risks, and are they things that you can solve, or are they just things you have to prepare for to make that best solution work? So this is not the exhaustive list, but this is 9 of the 15 criteria that we used. And so I'm just going to highlight a few of those. First of all, student safety was the first thing and a non-negotiable for us. This community has expectations for when our students are in school, that they have a certain level of security, and we wanted to keep that. Secondly, and you'll hear a lot about this before the night's over, is meeting state mandates and seat time requirements, and so obviously that had to happen. We wanted to make sure that we could maintain our student enrollment in regional programs. We have a lot of good programs like Gov School and SOA. Well, SOA is our program, and then New Horizons, and we didn't want to forsake any of that. We also needed to be able to still develop our special education services as necessary. We had to have an adequate plant infrastructure. Could the building handle the parking, handle the number of students, have what we need to still instruct effectively? We wanted to minimize the impact on families, and I know from the family perspective, you feel that impact, but we wanted to minimize that as much as possible. Another big determining factor was our transportation. We understand that we already have a very stressed transportation system. We have 116 bus routes in this county. We have 117 drivers. Once you have 2 absences on any given day, people are starting to cover. To give you scale of that, for our 900 teachers, we have 350 substitute teachers. And we don't always fill all those slots when people are out. So we have a very fragile transportation system, and so anything that would overly complicate that or stretch delivery times is not something we were interested in doing, because we're already having difficulty fulfilling our core mission of getting students to and from school on a timely basis. We also wanted to maximize our extracurricular and athletic programs and ensure equitable access to technology. So those were some of the criteria. So now I'll talk about some of the original ideas that we considered, but we rejected. The first one is using a non-school site or portables. And this is one that I know there still is a lot of discussion about, but you heard Dr. Shandor earlier say, the building is 300,000 square feet. To give you the scale of that, the Big K has 85,000 square feet in it. And that just would not do. And portables would have an extraordinary lead time, at least 2 to 3 months to begin to get those operable. We would need over 100 classrooms, and they wouldn't have specialty uses like being science labs, not to mention cafeteria and bathrooms. So this is one that we did not consider. Also, we talked about dividing students between multiple schools. This was logistically difficult, and transportation was prohibitive. Then there's the split day schedule. And believe me, we came back to this over and over and over again. And in fact, I think when we went into the room for the very first planning meeting, that was probably what was on everybody's mind. That's how we're going to go. And even me as a junior high student back in the day, I went on a split day schedule at one point. But that wasn't here, and that wasn't in this time. And we worked on that, and we could not get there on that issue. And one of the reasons was transportation, and another big one was the regional programs and making those schedules work. We also looked at alternating weeks, which is similar to the alternating day, but we didn't like the idea of students going a week a week on, a week off. We felt like the alternate day gave a much more consistent experience for the students. So after the VDOE letter of the 11th, then we started looking like, is there anything else that we haven't considered? Anything else that might work, as we are now starting to look at a longer school year, and what happens if we have to look at and guard against a worst case scenario, because we wouldn't be doing our job if we didn't protect against that. So one was just to keep doing what we're doing and try to buy the time by making the day longer. And because of transportation issues, what we'd be looking at is a 9.5-hour student day. How do you keep students engaged for 9.5 hours of schoolwork? And that one was ruled out. And that also had transportation issues, because think about the length of the bus driver day. Then we thought about, well, let's just put another school in for just one day a week. So Grafton would say, go Tuesday and Thursday to Grafton, go to Tabb on Friday, and then back to Grafton on Saturday. And while that had some appealing factors, one thing we were after was consistency, and we felt like just building all that variability in with students, with families, with transportation, you were asking for trouble there. Then there was the split day schedule, which we came back to again and came up with 2 different kind of variations on it. And we kept trying to make that work. It seemed the most appealing, but we just couldn't make it work either for the time or for the regional programs or for the transportation. All 3 of those things were limiting factors that kept us away from a split day schedule. So that brought us to our last one, and that was a 4th quarter relocation with the alternating day schedules that we were already doing. And so that is where we're at. And everything that were reasons why our original plan was better than the others applied here. The first, when they're in school, it's the most like a regular day. It's got the length of a regular day. They're going to see all their teachers. Now we were getting into a 7-period-a-day situation, but at least they're seeing their teachers every day that they're in school. And they're in a room with a science lab. They're in a band room that can accommodate all of their equipment in those types of situations. Also, there was less demand on the host school infrastructure when we talked about things like parking lots and meeting spaces and teacher workspaces. This works the best. Space for additional student support outside of the instructional day, especially those without technology resources at home. And so we're working on additional ways to give that support. It also supported the specialty programs, as I said before. Other schedules would not support that. We've had enough trouble trying to get it to work in this format. And so this one was prohibited. The others were prohibited. And it was less demand on the already stressed transportation system, as I said. So, let's see. All right. So in the end, what's the outcome? What are we looking at? So there were 3 parameters that we really felt hit the mark with this schedule. And you've got to remember, it's a worst case scenario. Any day before May 26th moves this up. So all 6 schools will reach the 990 instructional hour mandate from the state. It maintains a consistent schedule, pretty much. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday for Grafton, Monday, Wednesday, Friday for the host schools. There's a couple of differences with spring break and with the day before spring break, and then the last week after school, but it's a consistent schedule that everybody can get used to. And the opportunities for face-to-face instruction are much better than some sort of blended learning option. So that concludes my section of the presentation. Now I'll hand it over to Ms. Candy Skinner, Chief Academic Officer.
Good evening. Thank you for being here this evening. And I'm going to share just some things about some of the mandates. And for those of you that have attended before, you are probably aware of some of this, so I will just quickly review. And Dr. Carroll and Dr. Shandor actually touched on a few of these as well. So the first thing I'd like to talk about are the state requirements. The Virginia Department of Education does have a requirement for the standard school year. All students in the state of Virginia are required to go to attend school 180 teaching days or 990 instructional hours, and the key word there is instruction. When YCSD builds its master schedule, it's just important to know that we do exceed that 990 when we build that year out at the beginning of the year. Another code that the state talks about is the standard unit of credit, and this means that for every credit-bearing course, we are required to have our students are required to have 140 clock hours of instruction. As Dr. Shandor shared earlier, that when this incident occurred at the Grafton complex, we did immediately contact the Virginia Department of Education because we realized that even with that time built into our calendar that I mentioned a few minutes ago, we would be quickly out of that 990 hours. And so we reached out to them. I shared this at the last forum. One of the conversations that we had with the Virginia Department of Education has to do with this stipulation. I call it the C2 provision. And it's a unique provision, and we talked to the Department of Education about this because this really, what we thought kind of represented our school division, and this is really more intended really for snow days. It's kind of what the state puts this in place. But they said, you know, do you meet this provision? Yes, we do meet the provision. But in their letter that Dr. Shandor mentioned earlier, they did share with us that they were concerned about the amount of missed instructional time our students would have. And they also shared in the conversation and in the feedback that they gave us is that it is in our best interest to have our students attend school to the 990 hours, to make all efforts to get there. And that included things like using other facilities, extending the school day, extending the school year, and even using holidays. And so we also, as Dr. Shandor shared earlier, they said to us that we would be one of very few school divisions that did not make every effort to meet those clock hours. And then finally, they did talk about the July provision, or the July date, as Dr. Shandor mentioned earlier. And so with that in mind, we've also had a lot of people reach out and ask us about the waiver. And I want to first talk about York High School and Tabb Middle School. When we spoke to the state about the way that we were launching into getting students into school immediately, we talked to them about how we were going to use those two facilities. And as we began to have conversations, they did let us know that if you look at the waiver, the language of the waiver, that Tabb Middle School and York High School would not meet the waiver. It's meant for emergency situations, and Tabb Middle and York High School were not in an emergency situation. It would, however, pertain to a school like our Grafton schools. However, again, if you look at the language in the waiver, you must make every reasonable effort to make up those lost teaching days and teaching hours. Those must be exhausted before requesting a waiver. And so I wanted you to know those are the two pieces of information. Again, a lot of people have reached out to us and asked about that. One of the reasons that we had to look at moving the Grafton students is because our Tabb Middle School and our York High School students do not meet the waiver. They have to meet the 990 instructional hours. And so lastly, I just wanted to talk a little bit about, and both Dr. Carroll and Dr. Shandor mentioned it earlier, it's just about making sure our students receive the best quality instruction. 990 is a number, but for us, we want to make sure that our Grafton students, all of our students, receive the same instruction, the same opportunities to learn the content and the curriculum. We also want to make sure we're keeping their schedules as consistent as possible. One of the requirements that when we first talked, as Dr. Carroll mentioned earlier, is we want to make sure that none of our students had to give up any of their specialty programs that they're in. Our students love SOA. Our students love going to Gov School or New Horizons, and we wanted to make sure we made every effort possible to keep those programs in place for our students. And then also keeping to those extracurricular activities. When I spoke at the last forum, I did mention blended learning. If you remember, we spoke on Saturday, and we had been in conversations with the state for a couple days. We talked to the state in those conversations about the idea of using blended learning possibly to remove some of those Saturdays, to use that in lieu of the Saturday time. And what Virginia Department of Education since then in our conversations has explained to us that blended learning is a great way to provide supplemental instruction, but it's not intended, or it's never been, as a school division has never been able to show how you can use it to supplement for school instructional hours or days. And so for us, that wasn't going to be an option. However, I will tell you, in hearing from parents in the previous forum, we have spent some time over the last 2 weeks working with our teachers on blended learning and giving them some tools, because we know that when our students aren't in school, we want our students, if at all possible, to have time for remediation, to have time for enrichment. And so some of our teachers are now using Office 365. They're doing lessons with our students and through that virtual platform, because some of our students need more time, more remediation. And then some of our students who are AP students who are trying to prepare for an AP test need that time as well. So we've really tried to use blended learning as the state had kind of visions it to be used, but I wanted to explain to you why we aren't able to use it as a supplement to school hours or school days. And then finally tonight, I want to just address a few instructional matters for everyone, because I know that these are on your mind. We're now into the schedule, and these are the things that are going on for our students. It's happening right now. The first one is curriculum pacing. I wanted to let you know that our school principals have been working with our teachers to provide them some guidelines on pacing of curriculum. They've also been helping them to adjust their curriculum guides in a way that is appropriate for our students. I would say, is it perfect? It's not perfect, but we're working on that. If I remember, I told you before that we build in a lot of extra time in the school year, and so when we don't have a lot of that extra time, our teachers have to kind of redo their curriculum. My group is here tonight, some of our members of our instructional department, and they are also working with our teachers to help them learn how to maximize that instructional time that they have with students, but also helping them to look at their standards of learning and to compress those in a way that it's meaningful for students, but it's not overwhelming for our students, because we also don't want to overwhelm. Our schools are also working right now on developing plans for remediation. We know that seeing a teacher every other day is not optimal, but we are working on that. Matter of fact, beginning of next week, you're going to receive some information from the principals of our 4 schools that are impacted right now on remediation plans. They're going to be sending that information out to you. As we talked about a little while ago, we've been working for many, many days looking at every possible option we could think of for our schools, and so our principals have been involved in that process with us. And now it's time to really make sure that we are building in that remediation time, enrichment time for our students, and so that is in play right now. I will tell you that I can understand if you feel that your child in any way right now their work is too much, or they feel stressed out. Please reach out to your child's teacher. I encourage you to do that. Reach out to your child's teacher and talk with that teacher. Our school counselors have also been highly involved in this process. They will also work with you and your families. I see our 2 principals here shaking their heads. And then lastly, reach out to the principals as well. I know that they have been working with families, trying to make sure that we are balancing the curriculum in an appropriate manner. This is new for us too, and we want to make sure we do it right, and we want to make sure we're not causing anxiety and stress for our students. Some of the questions that have come in also relate to our SOL testing that we have. Information came out, I believe, this evening. Catherine, was SOL testing information this evening, or is that coming out? That will be coming out. So we have talked with the Virginia Department of Education, and they are giving us some allowances with the windows of our testing. So for the writing testing, which is coming up just around the corner, we have been given an opportunity to move that back, and the schools that are impacted by that are going to be reaching out to parents this week, I believe, to give you those new dates. Now, when we also think about the next set of testing, which happens in May for SOL testing, they've also given us some flexibility with that. And Lisa Beasley, who's here this evening, has been working with the state to talk about all of our schools, all 6 of our schools, and how that SOL testing will work. She's been Skyping with our ACCs, our principals, and our counselors this week, and we have got that plan in place, and that's going to be communicated out to you very shortly as well. Another thing that's on a lot of people's minds is AP testing. I will tell you that Mrs. Beasley reached out to College Board immediately to talk to them about our situation, and I am pleased to say that College Board has been very supportive of us. And so they have given us options. I believe it's 2 different testing windows. There should have been information that's sent home. I know I'm a York High parent, and I saw my information come out tonight. But if you are a Grafton High School parent, I'm not sure if yours has come out this evening, but tomorrow, it'll come out tomorrow. There'll be a letter that gives parents an option as to when you want your child to take the AP test. There are some options in there. We've got some flexibility. We've even thought of our seniors, because our seniors, while we might want to move that test back, some of our seniors need that test earlier because they need it for a college that they're applying for. So that's an option for you as well. It's all in that letter. And then finally, I will tell you, I know that there's concern that will our students be prepared. I've been talking with our AP teachers. I have full confidence our students are going to be prepared. First of all, we've been allowed to move the testing window back, which is very helpful, but a lot of our AP teachers have already been meeting. I've seen pictures of them meeting in the York Library. They're doing online sessions with students, and more of that information is going to be coming out next week to you. Our students will be prepared. However, as a parent, if you feel that, I just don't feel like this is the right time for my student, there is the option to have your student not take the test. And because this is the first year that College Board required a down payment on the AP assessment, they've also been willing to give a reimbursement for that. And all of that is going to be in that letter that's coming out to you. So if you have questions once you receive that information, please contact the school counselor, and they'll walk you through that information. But I wanted to let you know that is coming. I just wanted to wait till our schedule was released before we share that information. When it comes to Tabb High School and York Middle School, same goes. That information will be coming. We're just delaying that just a little bit because we've got some work that we're doing with them. But we are going to be sharing some of that. The testing window, though, for Tabb High School is a little bit different. The information you'll get is a little bit different because they will not have missed as much instruction before that AP test begins, if that makes sense. And then last, specialty programs. I want to first say that for those of you that have been through the initial moves, I want to, if you're a parent or a student, I want to just first say thank you for your patience. That was, and I know Dr. Shandor thanked a lot of people, but I have to tell our school counselors, they really worked through that process. They pretty much called every parent who had a specialty schedule. SOA, New Horizons, Gov School, ROTC, and they worked tirelessly to try to get those schedules for students. It did mean that some of our students had to have schedule changes. We even brought in a teacher for our York and Grafton students if they needed it that could teach SOA at the school. And that person is coordinating with the SOA teacher. This person actually subs at SOA or has been a part of that, so that those students can still be a part of it even though they may not be at the SOA campus. We are already working, Mr. Rice and his team, I believe they're starting tomorrow, is that correct, or next week, to start making those contacts with students and those phone calls. So they have the gift, a little bit of the gift of time, but I want those parents to know that we are committed to making sure that those programs continue for your students. That is our goal. And then last but not least, graduation. And I know this information came out from the schools today, I believe. But all seniors do have the opportunity to complete all course objectives, and I'm speaking specifically to our Grafton seniors, including assignments and quarterly assessments prior to graduation. Seniors who complete these requirements will receive their diploma at graduation and would not be required to attend the week after graduation. Again, that information was sent out to you because I know that would be one of your very first questions. I had a senior last year. That would have been my very first question as well. So I'm going to now turn it over to Q&A, and I think Dr. Shandor is going to come back up.
Thank you, Ms. Skinner. Before we get into the question and answer period, I did want to invite Paul Rice and Mr. Meadows, if they'll please come up to the podium real quick. Just for those of you who may not know these gentlemen, you can tell Paul's here at Tabb, simply by what he's wearing tonight, and Mr. Meadows, who is our principal at York Middle School. So I just wanted them just to say a few words.
I just want to welcome everyone. I do see some familiar faces from the car line from Grafton Middle and from the sidewalk in the afternoon. You guys are in good hands. My team of Ms. Welsh, Ms. Young, and Mr. Green, and Mrs. Kirsch, our athletic director, and Mr. Williams, our guidance director, we've already been meeting to make sure that when Grafton comes over here, as Dr. Carroll said, if it's a worst case scenario type of problem, we're going to be ready for you. Senior parents, we've been working on making sure we have awards assemblies and things of that nature. We're already looking at our calendar. We have some meetings already on the books to make sure that whatever you need, we're going to be able to meet it. So again, I want to say thank you, and we welcome you here at Tabb.
Good evening. My name is Scott Meadows, and I'm the principal at Yorktown Middle School. Excuse me. Ordinarily, I conclude activities and have to give a closing speech. And I'm usually in between dessert, and so now I'm in between the Q&A, and so I'm going to keep it very brief. One thing I do want to note, excuse me. I also want to just let families know that are coming to Yorktown Middle School, we are and we will be ready for you. I want to assure you that we're going to do everything that we can to be sure that we communicate with you, to let you know what's going to happen at the school with your child. We've already planned for activities such as open houses, so parents and students can come in, see the building, see where things are going to be located. See where everything's going to be located, and we're very much looking forward to support and to help make sure that the remainder of the school year, however long you're with us, is one that goes as smoothly as possible. So again, Scott Meadows, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. And we're also looking forward to making sure we support the Yorktown Middle School students as well. I didn't want to leave them out because they're going to be impacted as well. So thank you all very much for your time, for coming out here. I do appreciate the time that you're spending tonight. And also just want to let you all know that you're in very good hands. Having seen this process and having seen what's taking place, you're only getting a snapshot of the decisions and the processes that have taken place. And so as someone who works with school board office, etc., I think they've put a lot of time and effort to support students and to support families throughout this process. So thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for water.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm Catherine Goff. I'm the Public Relations Officer for the school division. So I'm going to walk you through our question and answer protocol for this evening. We want to make sure we address as many questions as possible in the time remaining. So we want to do this in an effective and efficient manner, and I'm going to outline that process for you. As you came in tonight, you might have noticed we had a few tables out there that had different topics listed on them. We're going to have staff out there. So they're already out there now, and they're going to continue to stay out there as long as you're here. They're going to cover topics related to the following areas: special education, gifted education, transportation, our specialty programs, such as SOA, Governor's School, New Horizons. Our English learners, if you have anyone who has a concern about how we're supporting our English learners through this process. And we will also have someone out there to answer questions related to child care or personal family matters that might need to be addressed as we work through these new schedules. So we're gonna ask the questions pertaining to that, especially if they're specific to your individual needs or your individual situation, that we have those conversations with the direct staff who can support you outside at those tables in the Commons area. Now, over the last few days, we've been receiving questions through our Ask YCSD account, and we have been compiling all the notes that you were taking outside. So we're gonna invite our staff members who have looked at all those notes to come forward with the most frequently asked questions. They're gonna come to the microphone first and look at those themes and questions that we can answer, and then we're going to open up those microphones again as we did at our prior forums for individuals to share questions on that broad scope of our new reality here. And we ask again that you, Dave, if you could move forward one slide, I hope that it's there. The last thing that we would say is that it's going to be limited to one person one question per person as they come up. So if you have a second follow-up question, we'll ask that you could yield the microphone and then allow the other individuals to ask their questions. Then if there's time permitting, you will be able to come forward to yours as well. Thank you, Dave. So that's it right there. I know, I forgot. That's because the last time he had it. Okay, so, and then of course, as Dr. Shandor shared at the very beginning, the mutual respect. We are all here to support our children, to support the students of this county. So we're going to proceed with those questions. I'm going to invite Dr. Shandor, Ms. Skinner, and Dr. Carroll back to the podium because they will be fielding the majority of the questions, I believe.
This question was submitted by a parent, and it's, my student is a Grafton student. Will the counselors weigh this situation, teacher recommendations along with SOL scores for class placements for next year, especially if SOLs are not moved to a later time?
So one of the good news is we do have flexibility with that SOL test. And so when it comes to making those recommendations, we certainly will factor all of that in. We know that these are exceptional, we're in exceptional circumstances, and those require exceptionalities. And so those are things that we have to talk about and think about in each of our schools. And so I know our principals, they're shaking their heads as well. We'll definitely look at that. We'll take that into consideration. Our students are not a test score. Our students are human beings, and we treat them that way. Our teachers know our students, and of course teacher recommendations will weigh a lot in that process.
Next question is, what do you consider to be an appropriate amount of work to be assigned to students while they are alternating days?
So that's a good question, and that question really is contingent upon the age of the child and also the child itself. I've been talking with our principals about that very question. When we started this process, we talked about having division mandates in regards to that, but our principals weighed in and said, we really want to be the ones to really work through that situation with our teachers. And so there's been some learning curves, I will tell you that, as Chief Academic Officer. I think that when we first went out with our plan, our students had missed some time, and so I think there was a lot of makeup work, and then we were missing days, and so there's been some adjustments that have had to be made. What I will say is, and what I've told the principals, is it needs to be reasonable. What is appropriate for a 6th grader is different than what's appropriate for, let's say, a college student, or excuse me, a high school student who might be taking an advanced coursework class. So that's where I can't give you an exact answer, but this is what I will say. Our principals are working on this. My team up there is actually working with our teachers. There's going to be some additional training offered to our teachers in the coming weeks to talk about just that. Pacing, making the best use of classroom instructional time, creating assessments that are valid and appropriate for our students, given the situation that we are in. Lastly though, and I shared it earlier, what is always right may not always be right for a child. And so as I shared, if your child is experiencing an overwork too much work. Or if you feel like, your child really doesn't have anything coming home, or your child is feeling stressed, please reach out to the teacher. Reach out to the school, because, again, this is new for our teachers as well. I know they're trying to make sure they're making the right decisions, but sometimes we may not think of something. And so give us the opportunity to work with you and your child through the process. And if you don't feel as if you're getting the answers that you need, please reach out to our school administrators. They'll also be willing to work with you.
This question is, how does this extended school year impact military families who will relocate before the end of the school year?
I'll try to take a stab at that one. Our community is already impacted by military students all the time. We're up to around 40% military impacted, federally impacted students. So it's something that our schools are built for. When you think about Bethel Manor, 100% of those students are connected to that base. So that's something we currently work for. We also have Miss Parr, who is outside. So if there's any military families and you have additional questions related to that, you can see her outside.
In regards to student absences, will a student be penalized if they miss too many Saturdays or spring break?
I'm going to have Aaron Butler, our Director of School Administration, answer that.
The Code of Virginia allows for, if a student has to be out of school, there's a process for excused absences. It's also in the student handbook. I think it's page 2 and 3. But all you need to do is write a note, submit that note to our school principals. They will review it and they'll work with your family. Again, if it's religious observance, that's always excused under the Code of Virginia. Funerals, if you have illness, death in the family, those type things. And that's spelled out in our handbook, but those are things that are allowable. If you have a special circumstance or something that's exceptional, again, please just talk to your building principal, write a note. They will review that with you and work with you in those situations.
With 7 classes per day, would students be allowed to have rolling backpacks to reduce back strain?
Well, I certainly think that is an acceptable accommodation for our students. I'm seeing my principals shake their head yes, and it looks to me, and I would say absolutely. I think one of the goals was to try to not have our students carrying so many things, and so if that is the case, I would really encourage you to reach out and talk to the schools. We're really trying to put materials in the classrooms so that they are not having to do that, but if this is an exception where they are, certainly we would accommodate that. But my hope is that maybe we can do other accommodations so they don't even have to do that, and we can make some things available in the classroom for them.
And lockers, they have access to lockers.
And access to lockers in some of the schools, yes. And yeah, I think classroom sets of books. That's one of the other things we've done is we've really tried to pair up our teachers and similar content areas so that you'll see posters up on the wall that would reflect what you would be learning at your other school. It's not perfect, but in many cases we've tried to do that.
This question was submitted. Why isn't the division removing electives and only teaching core courses to allow more class time for these areas?
That's a good question. The Virginia standards of quality actually require us to teach the different electives and different subject areas, PE, art, music. It's a requirement of our standards of accreditation, and they're important. They're there for a reason. However, our principals are going to be looking at different ways they could modify the schedule to make sure if there is a particular subject area that might need a little bit more time, they're going to work through that. They're going to work through individual student needs as well. And so more to come. We've been really having lots of conversations about that. My team will also be working with the schools. You'll see our team out in the buildings talking, meeting with teachers on the days when teachers aren't directly teaching. They also are planning to provide lots of opportunities for additional assistance in regards to that.
How does 20 to 25 minutes a day added to the day times 3 days equal 2 whole days missed? One more time?
Yeah, I usually don't do math in public. Can you repeat the question?
Sure. How does 20 to 25 minutes added to the school day times 3 days equal 2 whole days missed?
So I'm not sure if that's an attendance question or an instructional hours. Instructional hours is everything in the school day minus the lunch. So that's how we get to that. Now the 25 minutes, I'm not sure. I would say, please come to us after the session. Somebody will be able to at least find out what you're after, and we can research what the answer would be.
Right.
Right there.
This question is, has any other school division in Virginia used this alternating day format before?
Actually, I know this one. Yes, if you remember a few years back, the Louisa County had an issue where they lost a high school, and they used the alternating day. I don't know if there's others, but that's a recent example. But that wasn't where we got it from. We brainstormed a whole lot of different options, as you saw in my presentation, and we felt it was the best one for our context.
What is the protocol for prom now that students have school on the same day?
Well, that is a great question, as that was one of the first things, and especially we think about our seniors. You know, we're very cognizant of this very memorable senior year that they're experiencing, sort of a tour of the different schools. And actually, this is such a timely question because if you are one of my Grafton parents, seniors, our senior class sponsors, Ms. Falk and Ms. Logan, met today. They came to us today, and we're meeting on Saturday to discuss some different guidelines for all senior activities, because we want to make sure that you have your activities, we preserve all the fun stuff that it is part of being a senior. And so we're looking at different guidelines for the day. Also know we've talked about safety, because we know that can be a very long day for students going to school, getting up early, going to the dance, and if they want to enjoy after prom. So this is a question we're going to start to tackle on Saturday at our first meeting, and we're going to go from there and work with the school board office to see what options we might have. So we want to make sure it's a special event. So a timely question and more information to come on that.
Will teachers receive...
Hold on 1 second. In our school, we have a number of staff members who will step in for administrators during the day. I'm not much of a dancer, so I don't want to do that nighttime thing, but we will certainly provide support to the administrators during the day. Sorry, Dan.
So will teachers receive time or assistance so they can plan and grade papers? My child currently has zeros in Aspen for assignments that has not been graded.
We are currently giving our teachers time to work through that on the days when they don't have students. We have been doing some training, however, in the last 2 weeks. If you remember the last form, there was a lot of concerns about blended learning, and I took that to heart. And so we did do some training with our teachers over the last 2 weeks about blended learning and what that looks like. We also even brought in Microsoft to kind of work with us a little bit on how to best use technology to support learning when our students aren't in school. And so that has been taking a little bit of their time. We've also, they of course have been meeting with their teams about the schedule changes and things of that nature. And so it is our expectation that things should be graded and put into Aspen on time. If that is not the case, I encourage you to reach out to the teacher or to the school administrator, and we can definitely work on that through a case-by-case basis. I can't speak for that particular situation, but certainly there is time given for those things to our teachers.
Will there be practices after school each day like normal, and how will the underclassmen get to school for those practices?
Yes. As we were saying earlier, part of when we went through the different criteria, one of them was consistency in student activities. So we looked at instruction, we looked at after-school activities and sports. And if you are working with us and you have a student that's an athlete, Coach Parker, she is our athletic director. She has tirelessly been looking at schedules. We are coordinating shuttles to pick students up from the middle school to bring them to the high school for practices. We're looking at our times, talking with the coaches, and reevaluating some of the time frames when we'll be doing practices. That way it meets the needs of all students. We're reevaluating games as well and using different schools to host those games. So this is something that we are working on right now. We will have shuttles that will take the students to and from, whether it's at one school or whether it's at Wolf Trap, or so wherever the practices are, we will have transportation, and we're actually working on that today.
The shuttle was there today.
The shuttle did come today. Thank you, Ms. Anthony. So yeah, it's in progress.
This is my last question. Why are all the extra hours working from home, including taking quizzes, being counted toward our regular hours?
So I think I answered that question earlier regarding the blended learning, but I'll just state again. When we talked with the Virginia Department of Education, when we asked that exact same question, the intention for blended learning is to supplement instruction, but it is not to take the place of instructional hours. Of course, we did try to have that conversation with the Virginia Department of Education. They've not seen a school division that has been able to do that, even school divisions that have a one-on-one initiative, because of the challenges that it presents. Every child must have access. You must prove that every child is receiving instruction for those instructional hours. So there's a lot of challenges that come with that, and so that's one of the reasons.
Okay, so if you still have a question that you would like answered by our staff here in the auditorium, you can come forward to either one of the mics. We will alternate opportunities for folks to ask those questions. If you do have a question related to the topics we shared earlier, those staff are available in the commons area to address your individual needs, but we will focus on some large-scale questions still here in the auditorium.
I just have one question, like, is the, each class gonna send any for the, day, like 1A, 1B? Well, the reason I'm asking is my grandson comes in at 10 of the morning and leaves at 11:55. Will that change? You know, with the.
Are you, which school? Is this for Tabb High School?
No, it's for Grafton.
Or Grafton?
Uh-huh.
Do you want to come up? Because can you repeat the question, ma'am? I'm so sorry.
You know, now they're going to school from 7 to 2:05.
Yes,
If they
ma'am.
start going at 2:45 or 3 o'clock, is that gonna send the classes out any? Yeah, cause he just comes in at 10.
Okay.
On 3A and 3B. Will he come in a little bit later and stay a little bit later, or how will that go?
It sounds like you're kind of inquiring a little bit about how long will each class be and the start time for each class. We're working on that bell schedule, and it's going to be in conjunction with Ms. Harmon and Ms. Gould, so we make sure they will know when to come in. If they need transportation, we'll have that too.
Okay.
We're just working on that right now, but that's a great question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, as a parent, I can see that the teachers and staff are working extra hard all the time for our students. Will there be any additional compensation or leave time for them to make up for all the efforts that they're putting in for our kids?
Yeah, so the question was, is there going to be any additional compensation for employees, and certainly for anybody who's a non-licensed staff, they work on an hourly clock, they will, of course, hit that right away. And we're working through those issues. We're certainly going to make sure that people that are due compensation are going to get that. But that HR hasn't worked that completely out for all of the different situations.
And just to follow up, we have Dr. Vladu, who is our Chief HR Officer, Mr. Bowen, who's our Chief Finance Officer, and myself, and Dr. Carroll. We have meetings set for next week, so we're going to go meet with the Grafton High School team and the Grafton Middle School team. What is it?
Wednesday.
Wednesday. They know what it is. So we're going to go meet with them next week and have further discussion related to that.
Hey, sir, can you describe the timeline in which the Grafton High School complex will be back online for students will start taking classes? For next year?
I'm sorry, for next year? Well, next year we shouldn't have any problem at all.
Well, based on the timeline regarding the restoration of that particular part, 16 weeks, still you have to wait on the investigation from the third party.
No, we do not have to wait. We had to wait until February 17th to get into the part that failed, and for everybody that had a part in that to inspect it before that was removed and given to the independent laboratory. So now we are on a timeline where we have freed use of the building. And Belfour is working on the restoration and the smoke restoration. That should be completed actually by mid-April with no problem. There may be some loose ends at that point. But the delivery of the components for the electricity should be mid-April also. And then there's an installation timeline and then testing of that system and related systems. But we still feel confident that we're going to be before the April 26th. But we went with the what is it?
May, you said April.
May 26th. But but we're guarding against worst case scenario, because you just never know when you start putting power on systems if they're going to work the way they were supposed to and allow time for repair.
16 weeks for the manufacture of the part.
No, 16 weeks is the normal part construction.
Right, yeah.
We have, oh, Greg's in.
Sure, as we said in the video recently, the normal time frame, lead time for that part is 16 weeks. That includes the engineering of the part and back and forth between our engineers and the manufacturer. Because that aspect of it has already been completed, we've expedited that process. So we're cutting that down to 9 weeks, and I believe we are at least a week, if not almost 2 weeks into that process where the order's been placed and it's being delivered. So essentially, we stopped the production line at Eaton and they put our equipment on their line to get it out to us faster.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
I was not here for the first part. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm just curious. You moved the high school students over to York. Now you're moving them over to Tabb. What would the change? Isn't that a little bit? I just see it as being disruptive. You moved them to one school. Now they're moving over here to Tabb. I'm just curious as to why you made that decision. Why you moved them? I'm just curious as to how that came about.
Right. So we went through a decision-making process. And I encourage you to look through we're going to be posting this online.
Okay.
But what we came to was we had a change in the decision from the state. They communicated something that we had to do, and that was going to be, the current configuration was not going to work for us. And when you combine that with the worst case scenario, us guarding against the worst case scenario, we wanted to make sure that we got everybody in that 990 in this configuration, got all 6 schools to reach that 990, as well as keep a format that was working for us for a number of reasons that we went through.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi. So I'm sure I'm not the only one. I have 3 children affected by this, one in high school, 2 in middle school, and I have 3 different modes right now: communication, Aspen, Remind, and emails. So, there's 20 to 25 teachers that I'm dealing with. So I need to know what is the primary communication. Is it Aspen? Because there's examples where my son is in high school and there are no assignments in algebra, so I don't even know what's going on. Or my one in another one in high school got a 0 on something, and I tried to find it in Aspen. I couldn't find it. Just had a website, but didn't say instructions on what to do on that website. So I'm getting emails, and the emails don't say which class or grade, so I don't even know who the teacher is, or I have to ask the kids. So it's very stressful on the kids, and it's very stressful on us as parents who work full time. And, we're trying to get them to be accountable to check Aspen every morning, but it's not in Aspen. They don't know what they're doing. So, it's frustrating because they're getting 0s and their grades are slipping, and they're usually straight A's and B students. And so now I have a child that has a D in a class. So it's frustrating for us as parents, and especially parents who have multiple children who have, again, I can't even imagine having a 4th, and I have like 30 teachers. So I think as parents we need clarification on when Aspen's going to be it. The communication, having the assignments more detailed so that they know what they're doing. Also, Remind, if we're using that's another thing. And then I have emails coming in too. So it's frustrating because I have 3 different avenues of messages coming in.
Right. We completely understand your frustration, and Mrs. Cataldo and I did run into that very early on in the process when we started this on the first days of school. So our school division has many approved methods of communication, as you have spoken about, but what we've decided is we've asked the teachers to use Aspen to at least post which of those methods they're using, because we do use Remind and we do use these other things. So for the middle school, if it is Grafton Middle School, and I believe for Tabb as well, Aspen should give you your directions. It should give you your map on what you're looking for that day, because the teachers are going to use different things. If you don't see that, we ask that you reach out to the teacher or to a guidance counselor or even to the administrators, and we can help you with that, because we are still learning that process. You're absolutely right. We use a lot of different forms of communication, but Aspen should be the first point of contact.
Right, and then if there's anything additional, please let us know, because we appreciate your patience, because this is new for all of us. And we have been trying it as fast as we could to not just get the kids in school, but to get training for the teachers. So the teachers are on a little bit of a learning curve, because some of them use Schoology, some on top of Aspen and Remind. So we're getting training. We have been communicating with our teachers that we want to make sure Aspen is the main. So that is a shift that they're going through right now. But I assure you that this is one of our priorities, because we do not want to see any grades drop. And if there's things missing, we're definitely going to work with you and to make sure that they have everything they need so those grades are consistent. So thank you for sharing, and thank you for allowing us to work through this in the next week as well.
I just want to say y'all are doing a great job, and thank you for that. There's no amount of money you could ever pay to be in your shoes. My question is about the building being rebuilt and repaired. Is there going to be any engineering enhancements so this does not happen again, so that we're not in the same situation in the future?
So you're talking about with the restoration?
Splitting the grid.
Pardon me?
Splitting the system so that the middle school is not impacted by the high school.
Right. Right now, it would be very difficult to do that process, because the main power source distribution system comes back into that one point. And we also are fed by one transformer. So Dominion feeds us one transformer, one utility there. So that would have to be something we'd have to look at and re-engineer. So that would be a pretty extensive process to do.
And then any other sensors that could be installed so that detection happens?
As far as the fire and life safety systems that happened, we do know we had sprinkler systems that activated in that area as they were supposed to. Everything that we looked at in the building activated the way it should. Our logs of what the fire alarms went off and all that, they did what they should. I also have to give a hand to the staff that was there, because not only they didn't totally rely on the system to do its job, which it did, they also sprung into action and pulled one of the hand stations, and then also notified people to get out of the building. So it was a nice combination effort between our staff and our systems. Sure.
I have a York Middle School student, so we didn't go to any of the other forums. And how does this affect them? Like schedules, I hear of like schedules and lockers being taken away from, like you changing from every other day classes to every day. So how is that affecting our students? Like what's the plan for them?
Mr. Meadows, would you like to come up?
Or maybe, you could help. Tiana could probably help with that.
So clarify the question.
The question is, how will it affect the students that haven't been affected yet, especially the York Middle School students, because you're a York Middle School parent, correct?
Yes, it is correct.
Okay.
Like I hear that right now we go to some class every other day, but I know you're going to like 8 block. I don't know if that's true because I don't have a student that was currently affected.
I want you to know that Mr. Meadows and I have a meeting scheduled for next Friday. Okay, so we're gonna spend all morning together, and I'm gonna tell him what we've gone through, the lessons that we've learned, the tweaks that should be made, and I'm sure that he's gonna implement everything. What I think is important is a lot of communication, and I'm sure he'll do that, and I'll let him answer the question. But something that's a benefit of this is we have time to plan it, because we made this move with 4 days, and we got into Tabb Middle School, but now we have time to work together, and I've already done it. So now he can not do the same mistakes that I made.
Yeah, just to echo some of the things that she said, we met, I plan to meet with the Grafton staff next week, and we're going to go through and start looking at logistics. We've already met with our teams at the middle school currently, so administrators, guidance. We've already met with the staff to start talking through the process. And in my notes, one thing that I've underlined and put exclamation points is communicate. And so as we develop our plans, we're going to share that information not only with our staff. We plan to walk through scenarios with the students so that they know what to expect. They are still average age about 12, so they are going to need some assistance when their day changes. And then we certainly plan to communicate with the families as well so they know what to expect. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I'm concerned about the 7-bell schedule. It only gives the kids about 50, 55 minutes per class. They're going to be running to different classes, all 7 classes in one day, 3 days a week. I'm just worried about them learning instructional times, and then you got the logistics of the teachers sharing classrooms and switching out. And you know teachers have their room set up a certain way, and then you got another teacher coming in and sharing that room. So I'm just worried about the logistics and the learning. To me, that's a bit much. A 7-bell schedule. I mean, this is my first time hearing about it. And I'm just curious as to, in your research, what is one of the biggest challenges you guys are concerned about with this?
So I'll talk about the 7-period day. Typically our students are on an A-B block, and so there's about 90 minutes of time. And yes, this is different. The time is less. What I'm hearing though from some teachers is they seem to like this because they get the students get to see every teacher every day, and the time is a little bit different. My team is working with our teachers to look at how to, like for a lab, for example, labs sometimes take a little bit longer. I taught at Tabb Middle School on a 7-period day before we went to block scheduling, and I was a science teacher. So I know those challenges, and if we plan for those, we can do those right, and that's what we're doing right now. It's not our typical, it's not our norm, but we are trying to make the best accommodations we can to make that work. And your second question was, what concerns me the most? I think for me is just making sure our students, the quality of instruction continues. I know our teachers are working really, really hard, and they're committed to making sure our students have the same level of instruction that they would have had this been a normal school year for our students. That's going to take, as you can tell, there's an enormous amount of communication that's happening between all of our schools. We're going to need to continue to do that. We're also going to need to continue to have patience with our students because this is different for them. And there are days where they're not in school, and so we need to make sure that we just continue to communicate with our families, that we all understand that this is a different situation, and we have to have patience with that situation. Thank you. Your question?
Can somebody explain to me why every other day instead of 3 consecutive?
Right.
As a single parent who works full-time, I have younger boys that aren't as mature as some, so they're seeing this as every other day is a Sunday,
right,
and not an instructional day. And me not being there, I'm having a hard time focusing them.
I understand that. I also have a child who's impacted by this. One of the reasons, we actually did look at that as an option, and we felt that for consistency for our students to see teachers without that longer break was better for instruction. That was the reason we decided, instead of 3 days and then not seeing a teacher for 4 days, that time, there could be a lapse in instruction. You know, the further you go away from the last time you saw your teacher, you kind of forget maybe what did we learn. We felt like this would provide a little bit more consistency for our students. But certainly if you are with your children, reach out to the school. Let's talk about some options. We've got some people out here also that might be able to help you with that, because we do understand that this is a change. And if you're working and your child's at home, we're doing the best that we can to help support those families, because I completely understand.
Thank you.
Yes, and before we answer the next one, someone wanted clarification, so I'm going to provide that real quick. AP testing at Tabb High School is a little bit different than the other schools. And I think I mentioned it, but I want to just clarify. There are some tweaks to the AP schedule, but because they've almost had full instruction to that time, the AP College Board is allowing some things, and the reimbursement piece is on a case-by-case basis. That's just Tabb High School. I just want to make sure I was clear on that. Sorry. Yes.
Hi, from a parent's point of view, I just want to say that I appreciate and I thank all the teachers, the staff, and the administrative for dealing with this very, very difficult task. And you guys are doing a wonderful job. So I just want to let you know. But the question is, during the regular hours, you know, regardless if this happened, the student usually have an hour and a half to do the test, I guess. And then each of those tests will probably have 25, 30 questions. So if you miss one or two, you're kind of still okay. But now because of the shrinking down the time, you're maybe having 35 minutes on a 13-question test. And you mess up one or two, then you're dead meat. So is there any division, maybe like, okay, kind of thing?
Absolutely, and that is a good question, because not only does instruction look different, assessments look different. And that is something we're working with our teachers through right now. Sometimes the typical assessment that they might have used in the past, they have to rethink that a little bit. And our teachers are, today I think Dr. Shinder walked in and there were some teachers working on just having those same questions. They're having to kind of rethink these things a little bit themselves. And I know I keep talking about my team, but that's what my team's going to be working through with them. How do we look at assessment maybe a little bit differently? Do we need to break that assessment apart into two pieces? Or do we look at what specific questions are the most important to ask for that assessment?
Thank you. What I said, that deadbeat, I mean my kids.
I missed the first forum, so I missed the blended learning, because to me that seems like it would make the most sense. I mean, a couple years ago it was snow, we had to make up some days. This time it's the school building. Next month it could be an epidemic. There could be scenarios where we would have to miss a lot of school. I feel like the school division should invest a lot of money and brain power into really maybe 2-3 years down the road to make online learning a very viable option, getting the teachers right on board. All their lesson plans should be ready to go online, like at the beginning of the school year as they plan out their year. So I just feel like the school division, maybe you guys are already doing it, but thinking way ahead, like 3 years down the road. I don't know if it's allowable. I got the sense the school at the state level is not going to allow blended learning.
So thank you very much for those comments. I glanced up at Dr. Cable up there because she's nodding with you. We explored that, and one of the reasons that the state, it's not that the state says no, but what the state says is to meet the guidelines of instructional hours, there's some requirements, and it was on that slide. I don't know if I'll go back to it or not. There's some requirements that have to come in order to meet that provision for blended learning. And even in conversations with our state superintendent, other school divisions have one-on-one initiatives. They've not been able to use it in a way that they can prove that every student has access, every student is doing those instructional hours, and it also has to be under the supervision of a teacher. So that being said, though, I will tell you, one of the people that we have brought in to talk with us was Microsoft. We actually had a meeting, I sat in a meeting, part of my team and IT sat with Microsoft to talk about this. Because I think you're absolutely right, we have to begin to think differently.
Right, I feel like it's, we just need more people at the table, because I feel like this should be doable. Technologically, get enough computer guys in a room, it just seems like this is something we should invest a lot of time and energy.
I agree.
One other thing.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if colleges look at absences, but I know for sure my daughter is going to have to miss 12 days, like off the bat. She goes to gov school, and she's not missing days for that at all. And so, having attended those, does it not count as absences? Another question, should something go on their transcript saying they missed 10 days this year because the school building was not?
Those are things that we're working through right now. I don't know if Dr. Butler wants to talk about that at all, but I do know that our school counselors do talk with when the application process is going through. And we're going to talk with our school counselors about some of these things. You know, what should we do as a school division to work through this? And I think Virginia Department of Education will also help us with that. And I don't know if we're able, to be honest with you, that's a question I don't know the answer to. But I do appreciate the question, because it's going to make me go back and think about that and work with my team on that. So thank you.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add to that is there is provision. I've spoken, there's two types of ways that we look at attendance in Virginia. One is the legal requirement. So again, you cannot miss for so many days of school with unexcused absences. If it's unexcused, it becomes a legal issue, and then our truancy officer has to go after those students. But if you have excused absences, it goes into what we call chronic absenteeism, and that's when a student misses more than 10% of the school year. When that happens, quite naturally, there could be a detrimental effect on the grade. So that's why we really try to work with families and students so that we are not missing more than 10% of the school year, and we are trying to provide academic supports and help students to make their work and stay in touch with all their classes.
Thank you, Dr. Butler. So this will be our last question. We just reached 7:30, and folks, if you have additional questions, we still have staff outside, and I know many of my team members will stick around here for a few minutes when we're finished. So we'll go to the last question.
My name is Michael Conley. I have one child that's at Yorktown Middle School. And just a couple of questions. Up at, obviously the day is going to start earlier, and then they're going to begin getting up earlier in the day. So they're going to be stressed, fatigued, tired. Couple of things. Has there been any plans for resource officers to be at the schools just for safety alone, just because some kids may be stressed beyond their normal capacity? Because up at York Middle now, we just have a resource officer, unless I'm mistaken, every other day. Now that we don't have Grafton School, they're going to make amends to have one there daily. I don't know if that's been approached yet at all. The other thing would be those parents that are going to travel into York Middle School. There's a bottleneck up at York, down at George Washington Highway, or Route 17 at the turn, because the buses will be 3-4, and then you get packed up, and then there's going to be people coming to go down 17, making U-turns, and come from the right. They don't have a police officer there or a sheriff's deputy there to direct traffic. That may be something to consider, because these parents coming in are going to have to get up really early. There's going to be more traffic, and there's going to be a lot of tardies, so it just may be something to consider.
Thank you very much for your question. So I could address it. I'm looking back at my friend, Officer Hahn, who's in the back, who's probably just took that note. Our families have had to make adjustments going to York High School as well as going to Tabb Middle School. We have extra resource officers out there, or road patrol guys that come in to try to get that traffic rolling faster. So thank you for that. We certainly do that. Your question related to having additional officers in the morning related to stress. We do have counselors in our schools that can support our students, and we encourage you, parents, if you heard Ms. Skinner talk about that earlier, if your students are becoming stressed, if they're having academic or anything that deals with any impacts related to anxiety, please have those conversations with the school, with the counselors. So let me close on this. Thank you so much for coming this evening. Again, we'll have staff members still here. Those of you who joined us on Facebook Live. Again, if you have questions, please continue to send them through Ask YCSD, and we look forward to continuing to partner with you in education. Thank you.